Saturday afternoon to hear someone trying to run for President of the United States. I know you're used to all of us, right? We're here a lot. Anyway, look, folks, I'm going to be very brief because I want to get to talk about what you want me to talk about and what you want to hear from me. But I just want to say I'm running for three basic reasons. One is that I really think we have to restore the soul and character of this country. And I really mean it. It's not hyperbole. I mean that I think that we've pretty well gone astray. I can't remember a time when we've had a president who has gone out and started his campaign and decided that the way to do it is divide people based on their race, based on their ethnicity, based on whether they live in rural or urban America, based on what their national origin is. The president came down the escalator in his hotel when he was announcing, saying he's running because he's wants to get rid of those Mexican rapists. You saw what happened in Charlottesville when those folks came out of the fields carrying torches and chanting an anti-Semitic bile with the veins bulging for real. If you remember the scene, you just saw it repeated on television. And a young woman who was there opposing the hate got killed. And the press went to him and said, well, what do you think, Mr. President? He said, there are some very fine people on both sides. No president of America has ever said anything like that. Maybe Andrew Jackson before the Civil War, or Johnson, who was impeached before the Civil War. And it's not only stunned America, but it fundamentally impacted on how the rest of the world viewed us. You had the Chancellor of Germany and other allies and leaders saying, what's going on in the United States of America? And the president's embrace of literally international thugs like Kim Jong-un and a guy I know very well, met with him probably more than the president has, or as much as he has, Vladimir Putin, who was not a good man. And the way in which we have turned our allies into, they treat NATO, which is a great organization designed to keep peace in Europe and keep the former Soviet Union from expanding to the West, but also to keep Europe from fighting with one another again, so no one nation would have enough power to overtake the others. He treats it like it's a protection racket. We're not going to maintain our sacred commitment that attack on one is an attack on all unless you pay more money. I mean, so many things that have happened that have hurt our reputation and damaged our security around the world. Also, if you saw what happened was, I spent a lot of time in the Middle East because when I went to work for the president as vice president, I was the guy he looked to for, particularly because of my background in foreign policy and national security. And, we helped put together a 60-nation coalition to defeat ISIS, and including the Kurds, who I know well, and spent a lot of time in Kurdistan. And the fact is that what happened? Kurds lost 11,000 of their people fighting ISIS. And on a whim, without even telling his generals, he pulled out. Very small group of people. We had less than a couple hundred special forces there, protecting the Kurds against what Turkey was about to do. And you saw the looks. Just think back, just weeks ago, when you saw American up-armored Humvees leaving the area, and women and children standing there holding their babies up saying, don't leave. You can see the look on the faces of the military. They're ashamed that they're leaving. Former head of the Navy SEALs, former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, retired people who are not political at all. I worked with them. And they're writing articles saying, we've embarrassed ourselves, we've diminished our security. The point I'm making is it's got to change. And domestically, you're a beautiful little girl. I bet you're smart as you're beautiful. And you can talk as much as you want because this is boring, boring, boring. For real. And look, I conclude by saying that look what's happened at home. We've, we're a nation divided. A nation divided. That we're pushing people against one another constantly. So the bottom line is that I think the next president of the United States has to be prepared to be able to pull the nation together, to unite the nation. Has to be able, and everybody tells me it can't be done. Well, if it can't be done, we're in real trouble. That's what I've done my whole life. I've been able to pull Democrats and Republicans together to get big things done, whether it's writing the Violence Against Women Act, or passing the Chemical Weapons Treaty, or handing in a $90 billion recovery plan that kept us out of a depression and provided for safety nets for schools across America and police departments and fire departments, and spent $100 billion $100 billion on clean energy, creating the largest wind farm in the nation, the largest solar facilities in the nation, and so much more. We can get things done. We can get things done if we stop questioning each other's motives and we start talking about our differences in policy. If I turn to you and say, look, I think you're in the pocket of boom, 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 and you're this and that, and I say, by the way, let's work out something on climate change, or let's work out something on healthcare, let's work out something on cancer research. No chance. I learned a long time ago, it's all right to question another man or woman's judgment in public life, but not their motive, because you don't know what the motive is. You don't know. You don't know for sure what it is. And once you do, you can never get to an agreement. And so there's a lot we can do. Last point I'll make is that, you know, I come from a neighborhood, my wife and I, we weren't poor, but we were, I guess, technically, in a sense of economics, lower middle class. And Dad and Mom didn't make a lot of money. We moved from Scranton, Pennsylvania after there was a coal died when I was in grade school. My dad, if you listen to Barack, you'd think I climbed out of a coal mine with a lunch bucket. You know, scrappy Joe Biden from Scranton, Pennsylvania. And but my point is that a lot of folks, and I went across the country, had to make what I call the longest walk a parent ever has to make, up a short flight of stairs, to say to their kid, we can't go to the same school anymore, honey. You gotta go home and live with Grandpa because Dad lost his job. We have no, it's gonna take time. Well, we moved to Delaware, and it took 3 years. Dad finally was able to get us a home, and we weren't poor, but we lived in a 3-bedroom home with 4 kids, a split-level house, and a grandpa. And it was safe, but we weren't, it wasn't like I'm the first United States Senator I ever knew. I never knew I never met a lawyer, I never met a banker, I never met anybody who had worked for a corporation, a big corporation, who was any power. But what I learned was, what you've all learned, I've learned that the American promise is that you can be anything you want to be if you're given half a chance. There's nothing you can't do. As a little kid, up until I was in high school, I stuttered very badly. I remember my parents still told me I could talk like that. And the fact is, my mother looked at me and said, remember, Joey, you can be anything you want to be. Anything. Remember. And she'd always say, nobody is better than you. You're no better than anybody else. That's the value set that I think most of us were raised with. Basic middle-class values. And the middle class is getting clobbered right now. You know, you have over 58% of people consider themselves middle class, thinking that children will never have the same standard of living they had. You're in a situation where all the studies show if the average family got a bill they didn't expect in 1 month for $400, they wouldn't be able to pay for it. Have to borrow the money, or they'd have to sell something. That's not who we are. There used to be a basic bargain in the country. If you participated in the well-being of the operation you worked for, whatever it was, you got to share in the benefits. That doesn't happen anymore. Corporate America is making more money than the Lord Almighty has made for a long, long time. And guess what? Wages haven't kept pace anywhere near it, because they no longer think they owe anything to their employees. It's only their stockholders. So there's a whole lot of reasons why the middle class finds themselves in real difficulty. And I know people refer to me as, middle class Joe. They think that because I'm always talking about the middle class. It's not meant as a compliment necessarily, but I know who built this country. Wall Street didn't build America. Wall Street didn't build America. Middle class built America. Farmers, union members, workers. They're the ones that built America. I mean, for real. It's not hyperbole, for real. And, it's we got to start paying attention to where we come from, who we were. Sounds corny, but we hold these truths to be self-evident. We're the most unique nation in all the world because we're based on an idea. All men and women are created equal, endowed by their Creator. We never lived up to that, but we've never walked away from it. We've never walked away from it. And I feel like we walked away from it. We got to reestablish the basic fundamental values of decency, who we are. So, folks, there's a lot more to say, but I've already said too much. So why don't, as my mother would say, why don't I hush up? And the secretary will recognize anybody who has any questions for me. Thank you.
Okay, one brave soul needs to start this. There we go. Didn't take long.
I'm a hospital trustee, and one of your points was that you're going to adequately fund rural hospitals. And it would help you, because we just got $2 million back from Medicare that started in 2010. And it took us almost 10 years to recover that loss that Medicare kept denying and denying and denying. And what are you going to do on that end?
Look, folks, most people think my state's a big industrial state. I come from a rural state. The largest, northern part of my state is just like a county, a suburb of Philadelphia. It's those suburban counties. But the largest city in my state is 85,000 people. The next largest is 20,000. It's the state capital, and everything else is much smaller than that. And it's awful hard for rural hospitals to make it. Number one, because Medicare reimbursement is not enough, and it doesn't come in a timely way. And what's happening is, 60% of all serious accidents people have, where somebody dies, occurs in rural America, is they can't get to a hospital. You have 20% of the population, 60% of the folks from trauma who die in rural America. Because in many states like yours, but even worse out west, in states like Montana and Washington and other places, you have to drive 200-300 miles sometimes. Sometimes only 30 or 40 miles. That's not enough time. And so there's three things that we do. And one of the reasons I'm not crazy about Medicare for all, beyond the cost of it, is that a number of rural hospitals will continue to close in America because they can't stay open. So what we do is we change the way in which we reimburse hospitals so that you provide a bonus for any hospital that stays open, that's able to be open in rural America, and you provide that extra payment to them through a mechanism I set up that we can pay for, where you get paid for immediately for the cost and that you incur. But in addition to that, I don't know enough to know exactly what it is in this community. But how many people have had to go through the piece, mom needs an MRI. How are we going to get it? Because a lot of these hospitals don't have MRIs. A lot of them don't have specialty services for people who have particular problems because of the nature you can't attract the docs to come in the communities and stay. And so as these hospitals close, they close down sometimes the largest employer as well in the small town. And so it has an impact on what the community looks like. So what we do is we provide for funding for attracting doctors to rural America, paying them and paying off their medical school costs to go through medical school as an inducement to get them to come to and stay in rural hospitals. The same with dentists and with specialists for special needs, for special disease, prenatal children, etc. And so there's a way to fund that we can fund through the legislation I proposed in the expanding the Affordable Care Act to provide for the funding to keep these hospitals open and also invest in mechanisms that allow us to have, for example, portable MRIs that come around through the communities and pay for them in the states so that you have access to them whenever on a regular basis. So mom doesn't have to get in the car and drive to Des Moines to get, I don't know enough to know exactly where, but maybe you have MRI here. But my point is, you don't have to go get that extra distance to get there. It will come to you. It's a little bit like what we did in funding back home. My wife headed up an organization for breast health initiative. Well, what we did was we found we had those vans go through neighborhoods and pay them extra to go through neighborhoods, so the vans would show up in areas where a woman would be able to get a breast health exam done and be done by the kind of equipment that was needed to determine whether or not there was anything wrong. And so there's a lot of ways you can do this, but you got to make a commitment. It's critically important. It's critically important we not only keep rural hospitals open, but we provide for a significantly larger number of outpatient facilities that allow for example, mental health clinics that are badly needed in most of these areas, and provide for notions that you have the ability not only to have a hospital, a hospital can be a hospital just as an emergency area that doesn't have 20 beds. There's a whole lot of regulations you know about that most people don't know that are easy to fix if we spend the money to fix them. If we make a commitment, we're going to do it. And it's to get experts in particular areas that we know communities need, from being able to do everything from dealing with certain types of cancers all the way to deal with mental health, all things that are needed as badly in rural communities as they are in urban areas. But it doesn't cost that much money relative to the need that exists. And what it does, it helps you build communities. You know, if you have, you all know you got a high school here is a good high school. You know if you have a good education system. You know if you have a good transportation system. You know if you have access into a community that is a rural community and or an ex-burb, as they call it, something between rural and urban, that you can attract people because they'd rather live in communities like this if they had the services they have. So there's a lot we can do and will do, but I will give you, I'm boring the heck out of everybody here, but what I'll do is give you the detail, I'll give you the whole layout of the plan, exactly how we do it. The end result is people they want 3 or 4 things when they move to a community or stay in a community. They want an education system where they're sure their kids are going to do well, and if they do well, they'll be able to go beyond and be able to come back for a job in the community. Number 2, they want to be in a position where they have access to adequate and serious health care that's affordable. The third thing they want to be able to do is make sure that there is a situation where when the kid comes back, if my child comes back, they come back and there's a job in the community that in fact is one where they can make a living and live a middle-class life. But there's a lot more to say, but I've already probably said too much. I apologize. We can do this.
Many of the problems that are facing us are complex, and between Trump and Fox News, they've made it. They've divided the country essentially into good people and evil people, which you mentioned earlier. With the country divided, how would you try to overcome that and get the country together?
2 things. One is basically start by everybody knows who Donald Trump is. I mean, even his supporters don't have any illusions about who he is. But they got to let them know who we are. We are. And that means that we got to demonstrate that we choose hope over fear. No president's ever been a great president that's ruled by fear. The way to get you to do something is to scare you, to tell you this is going to happen. There's a horde of Mexicans coming up, and they're going to invade America, and you're going to be eaten up, you're going to be eaten alive, etc. Or it goes on. So that's number 1. Change the way in which we talk to the American people. Secondly, we got to demonstrate that we in fact choose truth over lies, to tell the truth. Just to begin to tell the truth, but not step down to that level, not get down to the lowest level that he seems to want to operate at, and the Fox News is the world. Number 3, make sure you let people know that, I'll get you in a minute, man, don't get excited. I can tell he has a hostile question, I'm going to get to next. All kidding aside. But look, thirdly, we got to make sure that we stop, as I said, questioning other people's motives. What we do is, in politics today, it's changed a lot, is that we used to actually not agree. For example, I'll give you an example. John McCain. John McCain, was a great friend of mine. We disagreed on almost everything. Almost everything. I kid John, I said, John, you haven't seen a war you haven't wanted to fight. And he looks at me and he said, you haven't seen a problem you haven't wanted to solve. But yet, on his deathbed, he asked me to do his eulogy. Because he was the same, he's a man of principle. He's a man who had, in fact, decent instincts. We disagreed on the policy. To disagree, you don't have to be disagreeable. It doesn't have to be that way. And there's so many things that people, in fact, miss that, in fact, we can get done. And we're able to get done. But what's happened with our politics today is the press is in a very different circumstance. They got a hard time. They got to get clicks up there in the news. They're good people. I'm not one of those things the press is, you know, the enemy of the people. But it's awful hard today. The new technologies that are coming up makes it very difficult to be able to, there's no editors anymore, to be able for your kids to determine the difference between truth and falsehood and what they see online, etc. And so we have to start talking to people in ways that are just straightforward and be authentic about what we believe. For example, at the end of the administration, our administration, Obama-Biden, after Trump had won, he had already won, everybody said we're never going to do anything else in the government until Trump got sworn in, beginning on the day in November he won. Well, I was able to put together almost a $9 billion piece of legislation by pulling Republicans and Democrats together to deal with cancer and to deal with research for other serious diseases by getting $9 billion pumped into 2 weeks before Trump got sworn in, after we were no longer had any power, and get an agreement that we would spend $1.8 billion on cancer research and the various things we can do to beat certain cancers, as well as the remainder of that money, close to $9 billion, dealing with issues relating to other serious health research problems. There's a lot of things people agree on, Democrats and Republicans, that affect the American people. But we don't even want to talk about it. We almost don't want to talk across the aisle. You hear Democrats saying, well, I'm going to get elected and I'm going to by executive order do the following. Come on. Come on. Executive orders are basically been used to abuse power of the presidency. There's 3 branches of government. And so what's starting to happen is that, you know, we're going to get so many things done we couldn't before because there's 2 ways you inspire people. The first way is you're an aspiring leader like a John F. Kennedy. And the other way is you're somebody like Donald Trump, who in fact goes the exact opposite way. You inspire yourself, say, I'm not doing that. All kidding aside, think about it. Think about now when what's happened in terms of the American people realizing, whoa, I didn't know that was going on. I didn't know that it was $1.9 trillion in the added deficit. I didn't know we were going to not keep the commitment to make sure we pay for education for people. I didn't know we weren't going to do it, go on and on and on. Well, as people realize it, now you're able to come along and say, look, here's what happened. Let me tell you what I can do to improve education for your children and why I can afford to do it, because I'm going to get rid of some of these profligate tax cuts that occurred for the super wealthy. Let me tell you how I'm going to get this done. And people go, whoa, give you one concrete example and stop. In the election of 2018, I went into 24 different states to campaign for candidates. And I campaigned for over 65 candidates. And I said at the time, and I went into purple states, quote unquote, toss-up states, and red states. And guess what? Democrats won 41 seats for the United States Senate, governorships, and state legislative houses. Not because we did anything particularly strange, but we went in and we just talked about what was at stake. No one knew before Trump tried to take it away about Obamacare. They thought that somehow was something to do with it. They didn't know what it was. But all of a sudden when they said, by the way, we're not going to cover pre-existing conditions anymore. You had every Republican going, whoa, 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 no, not me. No, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. Yet they were running against Obamacare, going to get rid of it. Going to get rid of the whole thing. Well, when you started pointing out what that meant, people realized, oh, is that what Obamacare was? Is that what we mean? Is that how it worked? No, no, no. You can keep your kid on your policy to the 26. No, no, no. You can, in fact, make sure that the 20 million people that got covered will stay covered, etc. And it's just starting out and letting look what's happened. A lot of what's happened, people are now realizing were a consequence of changes that took place with this president. And so it's easier to pull people together than it was before. Democrats, Republicans, independents. There's a lot of people who are beginning to figure it all out. And so there's a great opportunity if we reach out, hold our hand out to the other team and say, look, we can work something out. I think they're prepared to do it. I think we can get it done. It's one of the things I've been able to do. Yes, let's stand back here.
My name is Nathaniel Gavronsky, and I am a constituent advocate, and I work with people who are disabled. A lot of them are born with disabilities, which means they don't qualify for the full disability, like SSDI. They're on SSI, which is a half an amount. Which nowhere in the state can you afford to live. Talking cerebral palsy, autism, Down syndrome, because they can't work, and many of their parents aren't disabled or deceased, they will never reach an amount of income that they can live on, ever. No candidate has talked about this, and with you being the national frontrunner, you talking about it will make everyone else listen and talk about it as well. That's why I want to ask this question. What are you going to do when you become president to deal with people who will never be able to have a gainful income and are living with no credit because credit scores determine automotive insurance, jobs, and housing? And your credit scores are for these people, they can't get any of it. They don't have credit. What can you do to correct this problem? Thank you, Mr. Vice President.
It's a very important question. First of all, one of the things we're going to start doing at the front end is making sure that we, in fact, provide for early on the ability to distinguish whether or not people need help, particularly as it relates to tripling the special education money that we have out there, significantly increasing the number of mental health folks and school psychologists in schools to determine early on what the problems are that children have and young people have. But those people who are born with autism and other handicaps, they don't call them anymore, disabilities that exist, we should in fact make sure that they are able to be, and we do it underneath the legislation I have, make sure they are able to be taken care of the rest of their lives, including access to housing, access to subsidized housing. There's not nearly enough housing in America today. And also making sure that we have the ability to have the circumstance where someone needs constant care. I propose we provide for the main caregiver, if that is a parent or a brother or a sister, whomever, for them to get paid for caring for that person as if it were child care, as if it were dealing with a disability. You're able to get paid to do that, Thirdly, we need to significantly increase the number of nurses and nurse practitioners we have in the United States of America, which my wife teaches at community colleges because they're so desperately needed to be able to provide needs that people have. But it goes beyond all of that. It goes to the point of saying that many of these folks are also in a situation where they have drug therapies they need and they can't possibly afford what those therapies are. They can't afford the medical care that they need to get. And so that's why under my medical care, the proposal I have, which is to provide for a public option to take Obamacare, add to it a public option, which is a Medicare proposal. Anybody who qualifies for Medicaid would automatically have access to all this care immediately, like Medicare. And you'd be in a position where they could afford the kind of help they need. But in addition to that, there is a proviso we had back early in our administration that's been cut out that provides for the ability of people with disabilities to be able to have employers who will hire them and compensate the employer for the hiring of that person, that gainfully employed person. We started off, as you know, with people with hearing impairment and autism, the inability to speak. So we set up whole situations where an employer would get compensated for hiring someone because they can do good things. They can do things if they, in fact, have an opportunity to be trained. And so there's a whole range of things, but the bottom line here is that if you have, for example, an autistic child, it costs a lot of money for that autistic child, to care for that child. And we should be able to, under the proposal that I have, to pay for that cost for a parent, to subsidize them if they don't have the money to get all that they need, from health care to housing across the board. But you and I ought to sit and talk about the details of it.
I would appreciate that.
Okay? But look, there are an awful lot of people in America who have, and I'll bet some of you are among them, all of us are among them, who have children or have a brother, sister, mother, father, where there is a need for assistance, significant help, and to be cared for, to be taken care of. And one of the things that's happening with the so-called, this generation that's coming along, is they have to care for their children and their parents at the same time. It's a significant burden that people have. And that's why we have to provide for the ability of people to be able to take care of the legitimate needs they have, and at the same time be able to be productive. And there's ways to do that, but the first and foremost way is to make sure that the care that's being given to the parent or the child or the husband or wife who needs it is in fact able to be compensated. And if you can factor the one staying home to do it, you should be able to be compensated for it. And that's why we have to, for example, deal with child care. You know, in most, it's not, it's worse in some senses in rural areas because there's not access, but it's really bad in metropolitan areas. You know what it costs for child care for a parent and for one child in a city like New York or Chicago? $22,000 a year. I was a single parent for 5 years after my wife and daughter were killed when my two boys were really young. And I was a young guy, but I had a good salary. I was a senator. I made $42,000 a year. I got when I was 29 years old. But I did not have the family I had. My sister moving in to help take care of me. Then, in fact, with my sons, I couldn't have possibly made it. I was making $42,000 a year. Couldn't possibly afford it. And so we have to provide for tax credits and direct credits for people to be able to deal with child care when they need help. Or paid family leave. How many people you know end up in a real situation where there's a real serious problem where they have to take care of someone at home, whomever it may be, and they have to take time off? Well, there should be paid family leave. The way I take care of the paid family leave is I just make sure we, in fact, bring the inheritance tax back to what it was before Trump became president. And that would pay for all the need for paid family leave that are needed up to 12 weeks for someone to be able to stay home and take care of whomever that was. And they'd be paid. I wouldn't put that burden totally on the employer, but I'd make sure that it was part of eliminating the ridiculous changes we made in inheritance taxes. And so there's a lot of ways to do this. There's a lot of ways to pay for it, but everybody knows. How many of you have lost somebody, whether it's a son, daughter, husband, wife, mother, father, or yourself, to cancer? Raise your hand. Look around. Almost everybody. Almost everybody. But what are we doing about it? Well, we're finally beginning to be able to do significant research. Finally be able to do things that we're going to find some cures. But it's a tragic, tragic thing when the loss occurs. And so part of the thing we found out is, sir, are you a veteran?
Me?
Yeah.
No.
What?
Diabetic.
Diabetic. And you know, one of the things we're looking at here is that you're in a situation where you're a hell of a guy, man. No, I'm not joking. The prosthesis you're wearing now, guess what? You know, we're making gigantic progress in prosthesis, but it's going to cost a lot of money. It should be available to you, period. Period, period, period. And that's what we're doing. So again, these numbers, it's real money, but it's not remotely as expensive as some of these ridiculous programs we have that are being run around the country right now. and just start asking people to pay their fair share. Let's just pay their fair share. You know, capital gains, if you make sure that people making over $1 million have to pay their capital gains as the regular taxes, you can raise about $800 billion over 10 years. Do a whole lot with that, man. Not punishing anybody. I don't mean sale of property. I mean capital gains, clipping coupons. Why should we reward? Why should we reward wealth rather than work? There's a lot of practical things we can do that the public is ready to do to deal with the problems. We can not give people anything, deal with people, deal with their legitimate needs that are beyond the control of a community to deal with, and we can do it by getting engaged in having a fair tax system.
Mr. Vice President, we got time for one more, and we haven't had a question over on this side.
Try to do yes or no if you ask me an easy one.
So, I'm here all the way from Lincoln, Nebraska. The first ask that I have is that I get your John Hancock on the shirt.
Happy to do it.
Second, as somebody who has sat in the Vice President's office, what do you look for in a Vice President?
It's a good question. Look, I think we all agree that one of the things that's changed over the last 20, 30 years is that no one person can sit as President of the United States and handle every single issue. And the Secretary and I served together for 8 years with Barack Obama. One of the reasons why he said he picked me was because he wanted me to take on presidential responsibilities, because, not because I'm so special, but because no one guy can, everything landed on his desk but locust when he got, you know, think about it. Worldwide economic collapse, a near-end depression, over 300,000 combat troops around the world in wars we shouldn't have been fighting, etc., and going on down the list from there. And so what a president has to, a president needs is to have the confidence that whomever he or she picks as their vice president is someone who is simpatico with them, agrees with them philosophically on why they ran and got elected for president, and agrees with them on the large issues. They can disagree on detail, they can disagree on specifics, but they can't disagree on the fundamental direction they want to take the country. So the first thing I'd look for, and the reason why, you know, everybody says that, and the presidential scholars are writing that there's been no president and vice president closer than Barack Obama and Joe Biden. It wasn't like we were old friends to begin with, but I had great respect for his, and like great respect for his integrity. And he had enough respect for me to know when he asked me to do the job, there were certain things that he could just turn over to me de facto and give me presidential authority to handle. I mean literally, as Tom said, presidential authority. I could hire and fire. I could dismiss cabinet people if I wanted to in the area of this by going to Tim and telling him this is what we should do. We would argue like the devil together alone when we always had lunch once a week. We always spent a lot of time together. Every morning I met with him. But I need to be a good vice president. You can't ever put the president in a position where you are taking him or her on publicly. You have to be prepared. When I asked the president, when he first asked me to be his vice president or to consider it, I said no, I didn't want to do that. And I really didn't. And because I spent a lot of time with vice presidents. Vice presidents are just, standby equipment. And I asked him why he wanted me to do this. He said he wanted me to help him govern. And I wasn't quite sure he really meant it. And he said, no, I want to help you govern because you know more about how the detail of the bureaucracy works and the Congress works because you've been here and you know an awful lot about national security and foreign policy. But then we spent a lot of time talking about whether or not we were simpatico on all the major issues, and we were. And so what happened was he was confident enough that he was able to run the risk, the press saying, well, Biden's doing his job, of being able to turn over wholesale responsibilities to me, whether it was the cancer research or the moonshot, or whether it was handling the $90 billion reconstruction package for the United States of America, or whether it was dealing with having to get 156,000 troops, combat troops out of Iraq. He gave me the authority to do it. So whomever I would pick, were I fortunate enough to be the nominee, and I get elected president, would be a man or a woman who, in fact, was in the same page as I was, as the direction I wish to take the country. We could disagree on tactic, but not on strategy. They'd have to really genuinely embrace the strategic rationale I had for running for president and what I wanted to get done. So that's the single most important thing to have happen. Because you see what happens when, I don't want to be, I never criticize the president, vice president, or abroad, so I won't criticize Mr. Pence right now. But the fact is that you see the relationship between this president and his vice president. You have to be somewhat obsequious. You have to, yes, Mr. President, no, Mr. President. Well, the president and I used to argue like the devil in private, even occasionally holler one another. He was asked by friends what it was like having Joe as vice president. It was like having an older brother. We argued. Well, never in public, though. Never in public. Because you got to show unity. And when you disagree, if it's a matter of principle, what you do is you either tell the president ahead of time where you have a principal disagreement, or as I facetiously said, I'll develop prostate cancer or something and say I have to resign. Because all kidding aside, no job is worth having to give up a fundamental principle, in my view. So you have to make sure the person that you pick is someone you trust to tell you the truth, tell you when they think you're wrong, but understand at the end of the day, you are still the president. You get to make the decision. And if the vice president doesn't like that decision, if it's so profoundly divergent from what you think, they should just leave or join the president. And so it really is important that you have, and there's a lot of qualified people, but the biggest thing is, can you work with one another as a team? And can you, in fact, would I be able to say, I'm going to put so-and-so in charge of the following piece. You're going to take care of immigration for me. You're going to take care of what's going on in Asia for me. You're going to be the person who handles what's going on in whatever it happens to be. Because no president can do it all by himself. Sir, I know I'm not supposed to take any more questions, but I'm not going to say no to you.
Oh, I really appreciate that. I really appreciate that. I, like the gentleman over there, I actually come from Colorado. The reason I'm here is because my grandmother were in the school for years. So we got a house living there partially. I wanted to know what you do about school.
Folks, look, when I talk about, you've probably read stuff what Biden talks about restoring the soul of America. Think about what it says about who we are. When we sent off our children and grandchildren this September, kids 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old. And the first thing they have to learn in school is duck and cover. To be able to figure out why we're building schools that they have to have abutments so that a shooter can't get a clear line of sight. That's a country with a sick soul. There's something wrong. There's something wrong. And folks, look, I believe in the Second Amendment, but like every other amendment in the Constitution, it is not absolute. If any one of you stood up here right now and yelled, "Fire!" and someone got hurt, you're liable. And you can't say it's free speech. Free speech, I can say anything I want. Wrong. There's limitations. You can't yell fire in a crowded movie theater, as the old expression goes. But you also, in the Second Amendment, and every amendment has these limitations. The Second Amendment doesn't say anyone can own a gun. It doesn't say anyone can own any kind of gun they want. And those of you, and I respect your view, who say, well, the tree of liberty is watered with the blood of patriots, meaning you have to have enough weaponry to protect yourself against the government, then you need an F-15. You need hellfire missiles. You need flamethrowers. You need attack. No, I'm not joking. Not a joke. So from the very beginning, we've always said you can limit the type of weapon someone can own. We're not alone. Since the Firearms Act of 1932 or 4, I can't remember which date exactly, was in place, you can't own a machine gun. You're not allowed. Haven't been able to do that a long, long time. You can't own a bazooka. I'm not joking now, think about it. So what is this automatic right to say that someone can own an assault weapon? It only has one reason. It's only designed to kill people. And then if you go hunt with an assault weapon, then you're really a lousy shot, man. You're a lousy hunter. And we're able to say that you can only have a certain number of bullets in a magazine. For those of you who don't have a clip, that you can only shoot so many bullets in a row. Well, we protect international Canadian geese flying over this area more than we do our kids. Because in fact, you're only allowed to have 3 shots in a shotgun, three shotgun cells. That's all you're allowed to have. You can't fire more than that in your weapon. Well, why is it that you can walk into a school with 100 rounds and wipe the whole community out? You know, most of these kids are getting killed. I mean, mass shootings is 6 or more people dying. There's a lot of shootings that are less than that. But it happens in somewhere between 14 and 20 seconds. Okay? I'm the only guy that's ever beat the NRA, ever nationally, as well as the gun manufacturers. Because I was able to get a ban on assault weapons and limitation on the number of bullets you could have in a clip, as well as I'm the guy that got the background checks passed, the Brady Bill. So, I doubt what most of you would say. I doubt what most of you would say, and I own shotguns. My son, who was a major United States military, a decorated veteran, Bronze Star, Conspicuous Service Medal. Anyway, he passed away from cancer, brain cancer. I think because, quite frankly, burn pits and he was around. And anyway, that's another story. But you know, he and my other son used to like about goose hunt, duck hunt in our area. Well, I have 2 shotguns, a 12 gauge and a 20. And the only thing I ever enjoyed doing. I'm not a hunter. I used to like to skeet shoot. So you know, but guess what? I'm not taking anybody's shotgun away. But I also say that you should only be able to use a weapon if you pass a background check. Do we think we should be able to have anybody who is certified that they're schizophrenic be able to have own a weapon? You know why they haven't passed my Violence Against Women Act, reauthorized it, which I proudly wrote a long time ago and got passed. You know why it's sitting in the United States Senate now and not being passed? Because, reauthorized is a fancy word we use in the legislature, is because it has a provision that closes what they call the boyfriend loophole. If you are married to someone or have a child by someone and they've beaten you and they've abused you and they have a stay away order and they've in fact been convicted of domestic violence, they can't own a weapon. They can't own a weapon. They're denied, just like a terrorist would be denied. Well, there's a provision that we tried to fill called the boyfriend loophole. If it's the boyfriend you've been with and living with, whether you have a child with them or not, or whether or not you're married to them, that person is able to own a weapon. Even though they may have a court-ordered stay-away order because they are viewed as a threat to your physical safety. Most women who are killed by someone who is in a domestic violence era is killed with a weapon. But now what's happening is they say, no, I'm not going to deny the boyfriend who's been convicted of domestic violence or has a stay order, court order, stay away from her. That person, they think, should be able to own a weapon. So they're not passing all the other stuff in domestic violence law that's done so much to change the lives of women in America. They're holding it up. So, I think we have to, once again, and I will get it done as president, make sure background checks are universal background checks across the board, none of these loopholes, and also be in a position where, in fact, if you cannot own an assault-style weapon, we define it clearly, everybody know what it is. I used to, Delaware was one of the biggest, has the largest number of gun owners because a lot of duck hunters in the Delmarva Peninsula. And so when I was trying to get this passed early on as a senator, I would go down in southern Delaware and I'd walk through all the tributaries we have now, a lot of places where fishing goes on. There's a whole range in the Delmarva Peninsula, the Chesapeake Bay, etc. And I'd walk up the streams in the summer and they say, "Joe, damn boy, what you taking my gun for? We're taking my shotgun." No, I'm serious, not a joke. And I literally, I'd walk through. And it's a small state, in a state you know everybody. And I'd say, "You need one of these?" And I'd show me, "Hell no, boy, I don't need that." I said, "I'm not going to take your shotgun, but I don't think you should be able to own one of these things." Well, I don't. And by the way, how many shells you need to go deer hunting? You need 100 rounds? And if you do, man, you're in deep trouble, man. "No, I don't need that, I don't need that." So I'd turn up at the gun shows at home, and I'd make the case. Well, guess what? 58% of all NRA members think we should be denying people the right to purchase assault weapons, defined. I held hearings, monthly hearings, and I'll end with it. I held monthly hearings when I was doing this in the Judiciary Committee. And I said, "Why are so many more people dying? Are more people getting shot?" They said, "No." The docs at Bellevue Hospital and other major trauma hospitals, they said, when someone fires a .22 at you, it may lodge in your lung, or in your kidney, or in your chest. But with a 9mm, it blows your lung out of your body. That's why people are dying. Even had objections when I cop killer bullets, Teflon tip bullets that can go through vehicle, go through vests and all that. What's that all about? I'll tell you what it's about. It's about gun manufacturers because they just want to sell more guns. Last point I'll make to you is that if you think about it, this is not James Bond stuff, it's reality. We can now make a pistol or any weapon that only your DNA, only your fingerprints, only your biochemistry can pull that trigger. No one else can pull it. It gets fitted to me. I'm the only one who can pull the trigger. You couldn't pull the trigger. If I left it on the table, my kid couldn't pick up and pull the trigger. And guess what? They now have that technology. So they were selling those weapons, those pistols, in some of the outlet stores. Guess what? NRA came along and said, "You don't stop selling, we're going to put you out of business." Guess what? No one wants to sell them now. Now, how does it violate anyone's Second Amendment? If you pass a background check, you couldn't own the weapon, but you couldn't have your kid pick it up and pull the trigger, or someone comes in and breaks in and steals it from you, couldn't pull the trigger. It's about selling weapons. It's not about anything other than just the pure profit of selling more weapons. And the single most significant thing that happens today, I was asked to go to London to speak to the International Psychiatric Association, the group of, and the American Psychiatric Association, I believe it's called. And, you know, they've done extensive studies. You know, the one generation has the greatest anxiety and is having more trouble dealing with themselves and what they think about things and how uneasy they are. It's the so-called Z generation, between 7 years old and 20 years old. Why? The single greatest fear of every poll shows of young people is getting shot in school. Statistic, look it up, as my wife, the professor, I'd Google it. Seriously, now think about that. Think about that. Why is that? And it's easily solvable. You're not going to stop certain crazy things from happening. But the point of the matter is, folks, you can stop a heck of a lot of this. You can stop a heck of a lot of it. Because look at the, I met every parent at Sandy Hook when those children were killed. I even spent time with the police officers. You know why they were so said they asked if I could give them some mental help. The state police. Why? This guy then took the babies that killed and piled them in piles and then shot them again. What's going on here? What are we doing? Why are we saying? Folks, look. The only industry in the world, the only industry in America that's held harmless for being responsible for anything they cause, only one, is the gun industry. Congress, and a couple of people I'm running with, actually voted for an exemption that you cannot sue gun manufacturers for anything they're responsible for. The only people you can't sue. It's a matter of federal law. Talk about influence. Look at the drug companies. I've been talking for a while about how these opioids that are being sold, they sold 10 billion, 9 billion opioid pills over a period of 7 years. What's possible could that make any sense for except raw profit? There were 2 towns in West Virginia where they sold something like 100,000 prescriptions, not only the numbers, but multiple prescriptions. Because in fact, guess what? They made a lot of money. But because we're able to sue them for things they knew they were doing, guess what? They're out of business. They're stopping it. Because the courts are saying, boom, you can't do it. You knew what was going on. Just like tobacco. Tobacco knew the damage they were doing. They denied it. Well, we were able to have a class action against them, and guess what? Things are changing. The only industry you can't do that for in all of America are gun manufacturers. And the mayhem is being caused by it. Rational background checks, rational judgments on who can own a weapon, and rational judgment on what weapons you can own are totally thoroughly within the Second Amendment. And if I'm your president, whether you like it or not, I'm going to stop it. Thank you.